And welcome again to another episode of the Sligo Show here with myself, Brendan Tierney. And once again, we're upstairs in the lovely, cosy surroundings of Lillies Bar here in town. So this week, we're joined by two local media heroes, you could say. They've 80 years of newspaper reporting between them, multi-award winning. They've worked with local papers, national and international media, and they're both twins from Sligo. I'm delighted to be joined by Jim and Leo Gray. Lads, you're very, very welcome to the Sligo Show. I'm very honoured and flattered to be interviewing someone with such experience and such stories as yourselves. So nice to have you.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
Very good, very good.
Delighted.
So you're here today because you're launching your new book, which is called Local Heroes, a celebration of Sligo sport. And it documents stories from over 60 Sligo athletes. So before we get into the book itself, you know, for anyone that may not know you, I think we all know your pictures from the papers over the years and the years, but your own little background story growing up in Sligo and your careers.
I suppose we were surrounded by sport from very early, all our lives really, because our late father was secretary of the Sligo Leitrim Football Association for years. So there was always sort of cups and trophies around the house, and I think my mum used to wash the jerseys and they'd be hanging on the line. So there was always that connection with sport. And as we grew up then, we obviously went to the Rovers games from a very young age. We took an interest in the English football, the GAA. So it was always there. It was always there.
Did you play much yourselves? Was it a big
part? A little bit. Played junior soccer with, well, I played for Merville and MCR. I think you were with Strand Celtic, the higher.
How did the twins split the teams? How did that happen?
Probably one memory I have of us, both of us being in a sporting sort of confrontation was in St John's school leagues, which were legendary back then and still are, I believe.
Gaelic football.
Gaelic football. And Jim was on both were on different teams, and both of them got to the final. And the team that I was on, we hadn't been beaten in the whole season. But we got to the final against Jim's team, red hot favourites, and of course they absolutely walloped us in the final. So he ended up.
We won't get into that. So we didn't come here for arguments now.
But that was that was Gaelic football in St John's National School. Played a bit of junior soccer, and there was a junior GA team called City Gales. I don't think they lasted too long.
I've never heard of them now. I'm a blow-in now, but I heard long enough.
Nothing to do with us being involved in it. A chap called Ignatius Beglin, who came back from England, and you'd think he's a native of West Sligo. He formed a team, and it was good. It was good crack. So we played a bit of Gaelic football with City Gales.
And when was the first kind of dipping the toes into actually writing about the sport or covering it?
Well, I started in the Champion in 1973, which seems like, you know,
a few years back.
Oh my God!
I wasn't around then.
It seems like the blink of an eye looking back, but it was actually a long time ago. And I was just turned 17. Job was advertised for a junior reporter. I wasn't even certain what that meant, but I could type and I had shorthand, which were in those days the two critical tools you needed.
You got you a lot of jobs.
Certainly in journalism or in reporting so I got into the Champion, and it was an apprenticeship, even though it wasn't called that. That's what it was. It was the same as going into the SB to be an apprentice electrician. You know, you were learning the nuts and bolts, and there were great people in the Champion. Seamus Finn was the editor. He was a young enough man at the time. Jerry McMorrow, the late Jerry McMorrow, who went on to work for the Irish Press, was there.
Nicola Ryan.
So you were learning from really good people.
Journalists,
and we loved it. It was so exciting. And it wasn't just sport now. We covered politics and the courts and anything that was going on around.
And was it one of those areas you enjoyed more than was it always sport, or did you kind of go, I enjoyed the crack in the court or the local politics? Or?
Well, I think we would be fair to say we grew to love the other aspects of it. I loved, say, general elections. There was nothing to beat the buzz of
isn't it?
our local elections. That was great. The courts maybe not so much, although it provided a great insight into, you know, maybe a society.
All facets of life and society.
But some sad stories and
absolutely,
and stuff that you wouldn't normally have come across maybe if you had been doing some other kind of a job. But also the whole, I remember I used to actually love, even the Champion at the time was in an old building in Wine Street. And it was owned by the Townsend family, who were a great newspaper family going back generations. And I used to love even the smell of the print, the ink.
So it was printed in there as well?
The newsprint. And every Thursday morning, it was a Thursday morning, then you'd see this giant press rolling, like something from a Hollywood movie. And the papers just streaming off it. And it was a magical.
Was captivating.
They did move down. Was it down to Finiskin or somewhere? Where did they move? I remember being in it once. They used to do flyers as well, and I seen that being printed. I was like,
that's right.
It's just, and when you're young and
You know, it's like another world now, the way the whole industry has changed, but like there was something magical about the way a newspaper was produced in those days. And also, I suppose, being locals, working for the local paper gave you an added an added love for it, I suppose, but you felt a bit more intimate with the whole sort of production end of it, and took a little bit of pride in your work as well, in that you knew it was, for locals and for a local readership.
And that to be picked up very quickly if you weren't on the ball.
But that was all part of it as well.
And also, at that time, people kind of forget now, so long ago, but there was no other local newspaper. There was no local radio. So the champion was it. The champion was the gospel.
Everything was there.
And
you hear people nowadays that go, no one reads papers and no one listens. It's like, I would get the two local papers regularly still, and it's like there's so much in one chunk of paper. Everything you go, I didn't realize that was on. Oh, that sport result, and great stories. You know what I mean? So I think it'll take a while before people have this.
Sort of all human life is there. Whether it's a little line in a local notes which could be specific to that area. Mightn't mean anything to anybody else.
But it's a huge
people
story.
living in that area or that village or parish, it means everything. And that's the great thing about the local papers and regional papers, and that's, I think, still the appeal and attraction of them.
Sure, everyone loves to get the picture in the paper.
You're going to get stuff in your local paper that you're not going to get in the national media and that. So local journalism is so important.
The whole industry has changed. There's no doubt about that. But I remember somebody telling me, and it's probably true, people still love the feel of a newspaper in your hand, and flicking the pages.
Very much so. Very much so.
So that hopefully will never die, no matter what happens digitally or online.
So you joined up together then, was it the same time?
No, I came about 2 years after Jim.
Okay, and so the two of you beside each other?
We had bit of fun in that regard, all right.
So you were swapping, and was it most, and again, it was covering everything all those years, or did it eventually just start going more and more sports?
Well, Leo became sports editor.
I was about 5 years with the Champion. Then there wasn't, there'd never been a sports editor of the paper before that. It was about, the paper might have been, say, 20 pages at the time, and might have been 2 pages of that 20 devoted to sport. But I think it just began to dawn on people, that there's a readership out there that would like to see more sport in the paper. So we had a meeting one day, and I had a few ideas myself of how we might improve things and that. So Jim mentioned Seamus Finn, he was the editor. So I sat down with Seamus, and Charlie Townsend was the owner of the paper. I threw out the ideas, and we talked over and talked about it, and I said, we could do that, but will you take it on?
You were like, oh no, I come up with that idea now, I have to follow through.
I said, certainly, I'll give it a go. And that was 1979, and I started, I went into the meeting, as I said to somebody, as a kind of a cub reporter, and I came out as the sports editor of the paper, a role that I held for 35 years.
Years. So. And then you had, obviously with your sports specialities, you were national broadcasters and beyond, you were covering sports. Then was it more so yourself, Jim?
Jim did more national stuff than I did,
At the time, there were no floodlights in not just in the showgrounds, in any of the League of Ireland grounds. So the games were on Sunday at 3 o'clock mostly.
Okay.
And RTE had a brilliant programme anchored by Jimmy McGee, where they went round all the grounds on a Sunday. I think it was called Sunday Sport.
I think it was too. I think I have some recollection of that actually.
Bit of a giveaway in the title. But anyway, they went round all of the grounds at every sport. And so I was doing the live inputs from the showgrounds every second Sunday for the home games, and every alternate Sunday I'd be in Finn Park and Ballybofey covering the half regions. So that was a great experience, because again I was very young and it was very new to me.
Just raw live reporting.
All live, you'd hear the producer in your ear saying, "Jim, we're coming to you next," and then you'd hear Jimmy McGee, "We're now off to Sligo Showgrounds where Jim Gray's going to update us on Rovers v Bohs."
A few sweaty palms back then the first few times.
And also the technology in those days was so kind of raw that you never knew whether it was going to break down, or whether you were talking to yourself into a microphone. Nobody at home could hear you. Maybe you didn't know that. I remember a famous story. I was in Ballybofey doing a harps match, and I hadn't an outside broadcast unit in the ground, and there was no telephone in the ground in those days in Donegal. So I had to walk from the ground up maybe 10 minutes into the centre of Ballybofey into a phone kiosk. Get into the phone kiosk, windy up phone, wait for an operator to come to you, tell the operator, "I want to get through to Dublin 208, whatever it was." She'd say, "Hang on a wee minute." You'd put the phone back down, you'd wait 5 minutes for her to ring you back, then you're through now. And then you'd be on to a producer and he'd say, we'll be with you in 3 minutes, Jim. So now by this stage, you're nearly 20 minutes since you've left the ground.
So I think
then you do your, this is half time, you do your half-time report, and when you get back to the ground, the second half is 20 minutes old. And you're hoping that the other guys in the press box aren't winding you up by saying you missed 2 great goals.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So that's how
shows the difference
and sort of, well, backward might be a harsh word.
Well, that was the way it was at the time.
It was such a different time, you know, but it was a great experience. I loved it.
And I suppose it was all those experiences that you kind of decided, like the book has come out of them. And like, when did you first decide the idea, or how long has it been in, you know, the interviews and the production? How long has that taken you?
I suppose we retired. I retired in 2014. I think Jim maybe a year or two before that. So it was probably something initially we thought of. Then it went put on the back burner for a while. Then COVID intervened and nothing was happening. And we were talking to people about it, but because of COVID, no one was really kind of doing anything. And I don't know about you, Jim, but for me, what kind of prompted me to think, you know, instead of just talking about this, let's do it, was the Olympics last year when Mona McSharry,
Chris O'Donnell.
and Chris O'Donnell, two athletes from the same village, a small rural village in North Sligo, both from Sligo, and it just dawned on me then, you know, geez, Sligo has such a massive sporting story to tell across a whole range of sports. You know, let's do it.
And also people, genuinely now, a number of people on occasion from time to time would meet you in the streets and have a chat and say, geez lads, when are you doing the book? And you'd laugh it off.
But it's lovely to put them all on paper for history, like for the people that's in it to go, oh, that's nice, I'm part of that, like, and I'm part of Sligo's history, like sporting
and
history.
then somebody from a publishing company in Dublin approached me. I'm not sure who pointed in my direction, but it was another project. It was a book on Sligo politics he was talking about doing, and that didn't happen. But out of those conversations, we kind of got him round to thinking, you know, maybe a sports book might be an idea. And eventually, as COVID intervened then, but eventually he came back and he said, lads, you know something, I think this could be a runner. So we started working on it last January. And
it's now coming to, all the hard work is done, I just wait for it to come.
It's a pretty tight time frame, you know, it might seem like a long time, 7 or 8 months, but when you consider the volume of work that's in it, and
60 athletes,
the number of interviews and writing it and rewriting it and editing it, it was a lot, fairly intense, but very enjoyable at the same time. And probably because it was such a tight time frame, I think it worked better. If you had 2 or 3 years to do it, and you were working over, and you just mightn't get it quite as tight or as I say, intense.
And the other thing was, from a very early stage, once we started, everyone we approached was so open and so enthusiastic.
Did you sometimes feel like, oh, I'm annoying them maybe?
Well, it started to,
because you had the connections built anyway.
Well, most of the people, some of the people we hadn't encountered because they had come on the scene since we retired. But no, we didn't encounter anybody that kind of had rereservations about it. Everybody was delighted to be involved and very, very encouraging and
helpful, and you know, oh geez lads, you know, is there anything else I can do for you?
Absolutely. I have to say that was
sharing phone numbers and contacts, and you know, everybody. I have to say that, and that was a great encouragement.
I know, I can imagine. So you think to yourself, a monster to start, and then when they start, exactly. And I mean, before we get into the people in the book, I mean, your own, both of you, what was the best night of sport you were ever at? What was the most memorable night or the most memorable event? You're all smiling here. Not the drinking part now. Just
I was thinking about this because, like, Leo's a huge West Ham fan, so he's been to Upton Park, he's been to Wembley watching West Ham. I've been over and back to Old Trafford watching United. I've been to All Ireland football finals, hurling finals. I've been to Wimbledon, been to the US Open tennis. You know, we kind of like ticking off things because we're such huge sports fans, and of course the Aviva and all of that. But for me, I'll tell you what, where I get my kick these days is watching my grandkids play. My grandson plays for Strand Celtic, my granddaughter plays for Strand Celtic and Killera GA Club. And I'll tell you, I get far more kick than I ever got in any of the big ones. And in a way, that's what kind of inspired me a little bit to do the book as well, because you see at close quarters the amount of volunteerism that goes into, and like if there weren't those people, there wouldn't be the Shamie Colemans or the Mona McSharrys.
All the people in the book, they relied on Grandad and Granny watching them and helping out, or mothers.
And when you see that at grassroots level, it brings us home, because when you're covering sport at an elite level, let's say, for so long, you forget
The basic kids just having it for fun, like, and as you said,
well,
it's
fun,
a family day.
Fun.
And Leo, have you a special memory?
I suppose the best sporting occasion I was ever at was the Entry Grand National. Kind of fascinated. Yeah, I wasn't there that day. It was the year actually Tony McCoy won it for the one and only time in 2010.
Well,
but it was brilliant, and I always had a fascination with that. But obviously I wasn't working at that. But I think the best event that I covered as a working journalist was the 1983 FAI Cup final when Sligo Rovers won the FAI Cup for the first time. Because you know the cup had such a fascination for Rovers people going back generations, and they'd never won it.
First
loads of hard luck stories and bad refereeing decisions and all the rest of it conspired against us down through the years, and we eventually got over the line in 1983, and to be a local journalist covering that match was, was absolutely brilliant.
And even more special, probably getting to meet the team and players, and get the real feel of the story. It must be magic.
That and the 2007 Connacht Championship final that Sligo won. I didn't cover the 1975 one. I think you might have been involved in that, Jim. So 2007, they hadn't won it since 1975 until 2007.
Well, I'm a Galway man now, and I was at that day.
You were the red hot favourites. But so much about that day was, everything. The stars just seemed to align. It was Tommy Breheny was born in New York. He's the manager. Sligo, he comes back. The first match in that campaign was in New York. The last time Sligo won it in '75, there was a West Sligo man, Barnes Murphy, the captain. In 2007, another West Sligo man, Noel Maguire.
That's right,
In 75, there were other kind of connections and coincidences that just can't think of them off the top of my head.
I was at that match.
And they all came together in 2007. So to be there that day and cover that for the local paper was fantastic.
I was sitting beside the late Johnny Stenson. He was in our club at St. John's at the match. It was so funny. Like, I was delighted him to see it. Like, so it was really like a hero.
Another great warrior.
Johnny was the man of the match for me. Again, my memory may be fading. But in '75, I covered that. And that was a momentous year because I hadn't won it, I think, for 40 years.
As well.
But Johnny was absolutely brilliant footballer and a lovely
guy. I suppose the book isn't just about trophies and winning. Like, there's a lot of human stories. I mean, you sent me a little kind of a summary of some of the things, and like there's people like you have Mary Cullen, Bridie Nicholson, Martin Gordon, and Lucy Brennan. People who kind of went through adversity and had tough times. And what was it like chatting to those and hearing their story? Were they still emotional? Did they get more? Would they get stronger after their encounters?
We probably set ourselves a challenge to find new ways to tell old stories, because everyone knew Rovers did this, the GA thing, that Mary Cullen was this. We wanted to get into the real life stories of these people, some of which we knew beforehand, before we spoke to them, and other stuff we discovered as we were speaking to them, which was really great stuff. Mary Cullen now I think Mary won 3,000 metres indoor, or bronze at the European Indoors. And I remember at the time she was tipped to be one of the really up-and-coming top athletes, and she was. Like, I spoke to the late Ray Flynn, for instance, just a virgin for a minute, but I was asking him who would he have considered to be the best Sligo athlete that he encountered in his long career, and he nominated Mary Cullen without a heartbeat.
That said a lot.
Absolutely, he said Mary Cullen was by far the best athlete we have ever had, but she was cursed with injuries. She missed not one, two, but 3 Olympic Games through injury. Now you can imagine the heartbreak that must have been to her, and she tells, very candidly, talks about the devastation of that and how down she felt. But because she had sponsors, she had to drag herself out of bed and go to events, and she was really. But as she said herself, if she thought that was bad, worse lay ahead, because she was diagnosed with a rare neck and head cancer, which threatened not only her life, but she was 8 weeks pregnant at the time. And the life of her unborn child was at risk as well. She had surgery in which the tumour was removed, and she goes into that in great detail. That's
what I'm saying. There's those stories that we might realise. We just hear, Mary had a cancer battle. It was like, well, here's the real human.
And she postponed cancer treatment, actually, chemotherapy and radiotherapy, but she postponed it, which again was risky. But she didn't want to damage her unborn child, and she wanted to wait until the child was safely born. And then after the child was born, her baby son, she went back and recommenced her cancer treatment, and thankfully recovered very well. But she goes through all of that in great detail. It's a really lovely story, and she's a lovely person, Mary.
Bridie Nicholson is another one who had her own trials and tribulations. She had diabetes as a child, and in her mid-30s, kidney failure, and she had to have a double transplant, kidney and pancreas. like that would floor anybody.
Anyway,
and she, instead of feeling sorry for herself and saying, you know, what can I do in this with this condition, she became. She got involved in transplant games and became a multiple European and world champion, and competed for Ireland all over the world, in Thailand, Finland, South Africa, and came home with gold medals in a range of sports.
Yeah.
So, and what was she into? Was she sports was a thing, or was it that kind of led her?
Walking, she told me, was a big thing for her when she was young. But then when she became ill, obviously she couldn't walk as much as she used to, or be as active as she used to. But she determined that, you know, this wasn't going to get her down, and this wasn't going to beat her. And she's a very positive woman, and does an awful lot of work now for organ donation. But you know, she's inspirational, and she the way she tells her story.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like,
you almost feel ashamed of yourself for not doing half of what this
person went through and did and still do.
And exactly the same trait, Leo, in the story of Martin Gordon. Martin represented Ireland at the Paralympics. He's a tandem cyclist. Martin went to bed in a London hotel one night, fully healthy young teenager. He woke up blind.
Wow.
Now, he had eyesight problems early, but never did he think it would ever result in losing his sight. But he was totally blind. And he talks about it all just brilliantly. And again, as Leo said about Bridie Nicholson, instead of wallowing in self-pity, he decided this is not going to flow me.
It's amazing, the human diversity.
He had become a barrister. He has a partner and a young child, very happy home life. He's never seen his partner, he's never seen his child. He talks really a revealing way about what that's like, not to see your own child. And he says, I never think about what I don't have. I just thank God for what I do have. And he went on then, as I say, and he's represented, he came within seconds of winning a bronze at the Paralympics. And he's hotly fancied to get a medal in Paris in the next one.
Still on,
And that's an inspirational story.
Amazing.
Like he would tell me how he used to do his homework when he was a young lad, sitting on the shores of Lough Gill, because they lived out there, the family. And he said, suddenly, can you imagine anything more idyllic than sitting on the shores of Lough Gill doing your homework as a secondary school student? And suddenly that's gone.
Gone blind. That's insane. And as I said,
brilliant,
people just fight against what hits them. And again, I mean, there's 100 stories there. I mean, I'm just going to nitpick into one or two. Sligo has some connections with some massive sporting events. We know the Olympics with Derek Fox, the Grand National, the Tour de France, Mark Scanlon, but the FA Cup final once we had a Sligo connection there, and I never realised.
Barry Cogan.
Barry Cogan from Riverstown.
Right.
Went to Millwall as a young lad. And Millwall reached the 2004 FA Cup final against Man United, and it was Ferguson's United. Scholes, Giggs, Ronaldo, Keane, the whole lot. And this little lad from Riverstown, 19 years of age, had only played a handful of games in Millwall's first team. Hadn't played at all in the cup on the way to the final. Hadn't played in any cup game, but they were ravaged by injuries leading up to the cup final. So Dennis Wise was the manager, former Chelsea player, and he had to call on the youngsters. So young Cogan was on the bench, and then with about 17-20 minutes left, he gets on. Wow. And his first piece of action, he tells a great story in the book, throw in for United. Scholes was taking it, Keane goes, United are cruising, I think there were 2 or 3 up at this stage, but Keane was still Keane. Every ball had to be contested. Scholes threw in the ball anyway, and Cogan says, I'm going to get a touch on this. And he runs to Keane and tries to get the ball off him, and Keane, just nonchalantly tosses him aside almost and just smiles.
That's the winner in it.
This withering stare.
Wow.
And he said he still remembers that.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what I can't wait to see or read the book myself, because these little nuggets, and then tell us your experience of that. Like, what an amazing story that was. I see you have a chapter on the next generation. You know what I mean? You're seeing them and you're watching them a lot. If you could give us 1 or 2 names that we should be watching out for that's coming through.
Brian Colch from Ballymote, he's only 18 years of age and rowing. He won a bronze medal at the under-23 World Championships earlier this year, and only last week reached the final in the Senior World Championships in the Czech Republic. He's only 18 years of age.
Wow! So
and I never met him before. I wasn't all that familiar with him, but I knew by talking to him when I interviewed him, this lad has it, because you just kind of feel that determination and the ability, and he knows he has talent, but he wants to make he's doing everything to give himself every chance of making the most of the talent he has. And since we had the interview, he's been to under-23 and senior world championship, so he definitely is a big name to look out for.
It must be something you see in people's character. Like, we were lucky here on the Sligo show to interview Mona McSharry and Chris O'Donnell, and just the manner of them,
That's right,
you know, just and the determination, and just, you know, they were so humble, like.
Humble,
I'd say you've seen that in spades and many
times. The determination oozes out of them.
Yes, absolutely.
You can tell straight away these are serious people, and you know, they're really going to give it every chance to make it to the top.
Liam Currigan, who's in Italy now, Johnny Kenny, of course. There's a handballer called Cormac Finn from Ballymote who's already won lots of national titles. He's tipped for greatness. So
was a young boxer, Dean Clancy. No less a person than Kelly Harrington has singled him out as one to watch for the future. So
and then Dara Keenan, the jockey.
Dara Keenan, a young lad from Ballymote, is a really good jockey. He's unfortunately injured at the moment, but he has a great future ahead of him as well.
As I said, I mean, we could talk for 3 hours, but as I said, you have sections on. There's a lot of Sligo connections in the media and sports journalism. You talk to loads of people there. I mean, like I said, we couldn't get into everyone, but you've also a very poignant chapter on some of the sporting heroes we've lost, and all in the last year. Is that correct? So I mean, their stories, like, was it talking to family members or anything, or was it just telling their story?
About a month before he died, I was lucky enough to interview Ray Flynn. It was his last interview, as it turned out. And again, his enthusiasm for the book, he couldn't have been more helpful, and was so encouraging, and geez, lads, fair play to you, this needs to be done, and great stuff. And it's a great interview about his own. He was at 6 Olympic Games as an athletics coach. I mean, that will never be equalled by a Sligo man, ever. So then, unfortunately, he passed away very suddenly, and then we didn't know what do we do with this chapter in the book. So I spoke to his family, and they were delighted that this will be a permanent kind of a testament to Ray. And the same then, Red Oak Murphy, the young GAA player.
We sat down just at the start of the project, and we decided that we would do a chapter on up-and-coming sportsmen and women. And so we made out a list of the people we should talk to in that category. And one of the names on the list was Red Oak.
I think he was the first name on the list, probably.
Now, we never got that interview done, obviously. And so when he passed away, we were wondering, you know, again, as Jim said, similar to the Ray Flynn situation, what would we do? So I spoke to Colin McGee, who was his teacher and friend and his mentor.
Ex-footballer,
ex-footballer, great guy. And he spoke to the Murphy family, and they decided that they would like something on Red Oak in the book. So we thought then the best thing to do. Colin gave a very moving eulogy at the funeral mass, and so we got permission to use that in the book. And it's again, it's kind of a permanent tribute to Red Oak. And his memory will live on forever.
And John McGowan, the basketball legend. Again, when I was researching the basketball side of things, I rang a few people. Shane O'Mara was very helpful. And one of the people I spoke to was John. And again, very, very helpful and courteous and encouraging. And then he died suddenly as well. And again, I was wondering, we have to include John McGowan, because he's an absolute legend. The work that man has done to promote basketball in Sligo. So again, I spoke to his family members, and again, they were very pleased that he should be recognised in this way. So we have a nice piece on John as well.
Good. And I mean, what if you was there one story or funny moment, or like that was brilliant? What would you pick out for your own personal little moments you loved?
How much time have we got?
That's what I was going to say. You can think of one of the 300.
I think the most revealing story for me, and it's kind of the journalist in me, because it's kind of an exclusive that hasn't ever appeared before that I know of. Everyone knows that Kieran Kelly saved 4 penalty kicks in an FAI Cup final. That will never be done again either. And so I wanted to get inside his mind. What's that like to save in front of 40,000 people? And he went through each kick. He described what was going through his head, how he felt, what the body language of the guy taking the penalties. But as we chatted anyway, he started to open up to me, and nobody knew except his very close family. But in the run-up to that match, in which he emerges as a superhero, he was struggling desperately with mental health issues.
Really?
Yeah. And he tells this story, and it's a very important story, as we know now. And this was a 2010 year, so it's 12 years ago. And as he said himself, it wasn't as easy, not that it's easy now, but it wasn't certainly easy then to open up to people and tell them, listen, I'm struggling here. He said he couldn't go into the dressing room and say to the guys beside him, lads, I'm struggling, because football is a macho game.
And he was always lovely and bubbly and smiley. He's always full of beans.
And he carried all that. And he said that day in the Aviva was his redemption.
Wow.
You know, he suddenly realised I got a purpose in life. And he went back the next year and saved, was it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Two penalties the next year. So that's a great story. For me, that was the most...
That's what I love about this book, that there's going to be little nuggets of gems. And people know the faces and they might know them playing, but to go, oh, I didn't know that little bit of person. So can you think of any?
Well, the story I really enjoyed doing was on Sligo horse Kilcoleman, which won one of the big races, the County Hurdle at Cheltenham in 1977. You know, from a small yard out in Ross's Point, brilliant trainer Billy Boyers. He said he had never more than 14 horses out there. That's small the operation was. Paul Clark bought the horse and owned the horse, bought it for a modest fee. They trained it on the beach in Ross's Point and it swam out in the bay over towards Oyster Island. Came from nowhere, won a couple of races in Ireland and then went over to Cheltenham. And
just kind of, we'll take a chance. Like, are they kind of? They must have.
I'd say it was a bit of a plot to it. It wasn't just take a chance. But even that end of it was fascinating. And the two people involved, as I say, Billy Boyers and Paul Clark, two great people. But you know, as I say, from a small yard in the west of Ireland, remote in terms of Irish horse racing, and they went over to Cheltenham with this kind of unconsidered horse and won one of the big prizes. And actually, the horse came back and subsequently had a very good career, won a lot of major steeplechases in Ireland. And in 1980, Paul Clark was the leading owner in the country. Can you imagine, with all the big guns out there? He was the leading owner, and Billy Boyers, from a small operation in Ross's Point, was 5th in the trainers' table. So you know, that was
stories you never really hear.
And probably never got the credit they deserved at the time, nor since. Well, so it's lovely now
to document.
Exactly.
Well, lads, I literally think we could talk for 3 hours, because I'm a huge sports fan, but I really love the human background story to those moments. Like Kieran Kelly, I definitely can't wait to read that part. I mean, I know when is the book? I know you're not 100% yet when it's out, but
it'll certainly be before the end of October, sort of mid to late
October. And you'll have a big launch night and the whole shebang.
That's the plan.
Look, when it comes out, we'll share it here on our channels. Anyways,
very good. Thank you.
It's been an honour to chat to yourselves. What you've done for Sligo Sport, I'm sure many of the sportssters you interviewed would probably have great words of praise for yourselves as well. So it must have been lovely to look back and go, at least you got to live this life less ordinary and see so many wonderful things.
It was lovely to relive all those memories, and to meet and talk to people who've sort of come on the scene since we stopped working. It was lovely to meet them as well and talk to them.
And people trust you to tell their stories, which is a great thing.
Exactly.
That's really
what did they want? No, I can imagine.
That was nice.
So the book is Local Heroes, a celebration of Sligo sport. Leo and Jim Gray, it's been a real honour and a pleasure to have a chat to you, and I can't wait to read this book. It's fantastic. Thanks so much for coming in and chatting to us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Privilege. Thank you.
So that was Leo and Jim Gray. Watch out for their book coming out in the next few weeks, sometime before the end of October. Thanks for listening to us or watching us here, and thanks to the guys in Lillies. Thanks to Brian behind the cameras, who does all the real hard work here. And we will see you all again next time. So if you liked what you just seen, don't forget to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel here. We've loads of great interviews from a load of really interesting people over the series. And if you're on social media, which I'm sure loads of you are, we are on Instagram and Facebook, so give us a follow there.